started. Hi, boys and girls. It's so good to be here with you for today's Tuesday Book Talk. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about an inventor, some mathematicians, and some leaders. So I'm super excited. Thank you so much for joining us today. So the first one is an inventor. What do you think about when you think of the word inventor? What does an inventor look like to you? If you're watching this video right now with someone, why don't you share with them what you think an inventor is? Go ahead. I'll be quiet for a minute. Let's think. What is an inventor? What does an inventor look like to you? Share. I'd like to share with you what I think an inventor is. I think an inventor is someone who thinks creatively and then wonders, what would it be like to put these things together? You know, and sometimes when we're inventing things or creating something, we make a mistake. But sometimes those mistakes lead us to these amazing things. And that's what happened in our first story today. So I'm excited to share that with you. What about a mathematician? What is a mathematician? It's got the word math in it, see? What is a mathematician? I wonder if you guys are seeing this backwards. There's a good chance you're seeing these words backwards now that I think about it. Oh, well, it's too late. A mathematician. What is a mathematician? A mathematician is someone who works with and knows a lot about math. Yeah. What do you think a mathematician looks like? Do you often see mathematicians? Would you know them if you saw them? What do you think one would look like? We're going to see some today. And what about leader? A leader. What's a leader to you? What do you think a leader is? So again, if you have somebody with you, you can share with them, or let's just take a minute to think about what are some qualities that a leader has. What do you think it means to be a leader? And what does a leader look like to you? What would you think a leader would look like? Let's take a minute. What do you think? What do you think it means to be a leader? I would love to hear what you shared. I'll share what I think. I think a leader is made up of a couple of different things. I think that a leader is somebody who inspires others to be their very best self. That's what I think of a leader. When I think of a leader, another thing I think about is someone who thinks about the good of the entire group. Entire group of people, whoever they're working with, the entire group, versus maybe just a certain few people. They think about the good of the whole. That's what I think. And I also think that a leader is someone who knows that from time to time, there's going to be some problems to solve. There's going to be some challenges to overcome. And in doing so, they do their very best to hold to having kindness for themselves, kindness and respect towards themselves and to everybody who's involved. Those are things I think of when I think of a leader. So let's get started with today's books, shall we? So today we are going to look at Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Invention by Chris Barton, illustrated by Don Tate. So this is our first book. This is our first person who's an inventor. So let's see, where did Lonnie start? Let's see where Lonnie started, shall we? All right. Can you see this? You see the picture? So every day brought a challenge for young Lonnie Johnson, the challenge of finding space for his stuff. 6 Johnson kids were squeezed into their parents' small house in Mobile, Alabama. Lonnie would have loved a workshop of his own, but there just wasn't room. There was nowhere to keep his rocket kits, his bamboo shooters, his rubber band guns, erector set, go-kart engine, bolts and screws, and other spare parts his dad let him bring in from the shed, and various other things he'd hauled back from the junkyard. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. So this is Lonnie Johnson. Do you like to create things? Do you like to make things? Are you currently working on something right now? I'd love to see what you are making. So maybe you and Lonnie have a lot in common. You know, so this book is about the super soaker. And I know that lots of you guys, you've had a chance to either play with super soakers or something very similar like water shooters. Did you know that there was a time when there was no such thing? Nobody had invented this toy. And because of that, when Lonnie first created it, he knew it wouldn't be a fair battle if there was just one. So he went to companies and he asked if they would help him manufacture this toy, which means to make multiple of this toy so he could share it so the children could buy it and they could play with these water super soakers. Well, since it was such a really new thing and nobody had ever heard about it, companies weren't very excited about backing him and helping him. They were like, "What is that? Well, nobody will buy that." So I wanted to share. This is one of my favorite things about this book. This is what drew me to it. So let's see what happens. Finally, Lonnie tested this strange-looking squirt gun at a picnic. "Does it really work?" a man asked. "Sure," Lonnie said. "Want to see?" Lonnie worked the pump, which squeezed air into a chamber. And when he pulled the trigger, the air escaped, forcing water out with a whoosh. For a water battle to be a fair fight, there couldn't be just one of Lonnie's guns. He needed help making more. So he went to a toy company after toy company after toy company. The word no flowed again and again. But finally, one company said yes. It planned to make his water gun. Lonnie also had other projects, a water-propelled toy airplane, two kinds of engines, and his cooling system. Now, his cooling system, that is the invention that Lonnie was actually trying to invent. And he made a mistake, and his wonderful, amazing mistake turned into the super soaker. So sometimes it's really fun making mistakes because you never know what surprises are going to come out of them. He found investors to provide the money for turning his ideas into products people could buy. He made a leap of faith, quit his day job, and devoted himself to full-time inventing. But soon each plan fell apart, even the one for the water gun. These things sometimes happen, but when they happen one after another to the same person, well, that's some pretty bad luck. Lonnie didn't have a job. He didn't have the money he'd been counting on. He and his family had to move out of their home and into a little apartment. He was angry and scared. But Lonnie had dealt with challenges all his life, and he knew a lot about solving problems. And he still believed in his inventions, especially the water gun. Lonnie went looking for another toy company. So Lonnie faced a lot of challenges. I wonder what things have you worked on before that you really wanted to work, and it just the more you tried, it didn't work. What are some strategies you use to kind of keep going with that? Another thing is what inventions or what things have you created or things that you've worked on where you thought you made a mistake and actually it was this most wonderful thing ever that was created. So maybe there's some of those too. I'd love to hear what surprises you have found through mistakes. So maybe you could share that with us in the comments below this video. So we're going to move on to our next book. What I would encourage you is to read Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Inventions by Chris Barton, illustrated by Don Tate. And I would like for you to see if you, in reading the book, can you see if you have some similar curiosities and perseverance and just silly, playful attitude that Lonnie has. And you can also read about how he ended up eventually the Super Soaker did get made. We know that now, but find out how and how it all came about in this really nice book. So we're going to move to our next book. Our next book. One thing I didn't tell you about Lonnie Johnson is that before he was an inventor, he worked for NASA. You know NASA, right? NASA is a place where people work to help send other people into space. Yeah, NASA. Well, that is how I got to our next book. Our next book is called Hidden Figures, The True Story of Four Black Women and the Space Race. Now, there's a lot of math that goes into figuring out problems of going into space. And so that kind of brings us back to our word mathematician. You remember that? So these ladies were mathematicians. And there was a time that, just like the Super Soaker, before the Super Soaker was ever invented and nobody knew about the Super Soaker, there was a time where there weren't computers. We didn't have computers. And so they used people. People were the people who did the math, and they did computations, and they did calculations to figure out really difficult mathematical problems. And these ladies at that time were known as computers before computers were ever invented. These ladies really loved math, and they did formulas to help astronauts at the time go into space. One of these ladies, this is Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Katherine Johnson, and Christine Darden. That's the name of these ladies. And one of them in particular, counting on I'm sorry. This book was, the author is Margaret Lee Shetterly, illustrated by Lori Freeman. I apologize for missing that. So that's who wrote this book. And in this book, they talk about Katherine Johnson. And Katherine Johnson is the next book I wanted to bring up. So Katherine Johnson, she also helped do the problems, the mathematical problems to help send astronauts into space. But what Katherine is credited for is that there was an accident in one of the missions that went, Apollo 13. And she's credited for figuring out the mathematical formula that you needed to get the astronauts back to Earth safely. So you can learn more about that in Counting on Katherine, How Katherine Johnson Saved Apollo 13 by Helene Becker, illustrated by Dow Kumrick. And this is also a Red Clover Award nominee book. But this is, you can read about that in here. So these four women loved math. Love math. Let me show you. Let me show you what I mean when I say they loved math. Okay. So this is just Katherine's example. Katherine loved to count. She counted the steps to the road, the steps to the church, the number of dishes and spoons she washed in the bright white sink. The only thing she didn't count were the stars in the sky. Only a fool, she thought, would try that. Even so, the stars sparked her imagination. What was out there? Katherine yearned to know as much as she could about numbers, about the universe, about everything. So, this is a book. These are some wonderful mathematics books. Maybe you too, if you love to count the way these women did, and if you love math, maybe you could use it one day. You could use math to help follow your dreams and find new wonders of the world. So that brings us to our next book. our next book, had a really hard time trying to figure out, are these people leaders? Are they adventurers? So we come up to our next one, leaders, adventurers, explorers. Well, actually, in the title, that's called Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. She is the author and the illustrator of this book. I think it's pretty easy to say that they have characteristics of all of them. Leaders, explorers, adventurers, I think they're all in here. I'll tell you, the thing that drew me to this book is in the very beginning, in the introduction. The author wrote something to the reader that I would like to share with you. So, this is the introduction. I think about what kinds of dreams I might have had if I had known about all these women when I was growing up. If I'd known that so many people who looked like me had done such incredible things, to be able to see yourself in someone else's story can be life-changing. To know that achievable can be empowering. I think I'm saying that right. I hope that anyone who reads these biographies, whether or not they look like these little leaders, is inspired to go after the things they are passionate about. She says, I designed them, the pictures in the book, I designed them to be interchangeable because I want you, the reader, to see yourself in any one of them and to feel their strength and possibility in you. So this is a fantastic book. It talks about women in history. It has a picture of the person, and it gives a one-page biography of their life, things that they've done. And I have one that I picked out that I'd like to share with you. This is about Bessie Coleman. So I'm going to just show you the picture of Bessie Coleman, and then I'll read this one to you. She's a pilot. She lived in 1892 to 1926. Okay, so Bessie Coleman, the pilot. Bessie grew up in a small segregated town in Texas. At home with 3 younger siblings around, she had a lot of responsibilities. Washing clothes by hand, fetching clean water, on top of walking 4 miles to school and back every day. Bessie knew that one day she would leave her small town. In 1915, she moved to Chicago to live with her older brothers. Returning from World War I, they told her all about being in France and about how the women there could fly planes, unlike the women in America. Bessie got curious, furiously curious. She applied to every aviation school in America she could find, but was denied entry. No one at any of these schools thought a girl could fly, especially not a black girl. Bessie wanted to prove them wrong, and in 1920 she moved to France where she could finally learn aviation. She was so gifted. She graduated from the 10-month flight school in only 7 months. So in 1921, Bessie became the first African American woman in the world to receive her pilot's license. She specialized in stunt flying, parachuting, and aerial tricks. After returning home to the United States, Bessie flew for huge crowds. She was very popular among both white and black Americans and stood up against segregation and discrimination whenever she could. She hoped to open her own flight school to teach other girls of color how to fly. Unfortunately, during a show in 1926, a mechanical issue caused her plane to crash. Bessie passed away, but her legacy lives on. In 1977, the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club opened in Chicago to support women of all races to reach their dream of flying. And Bessie Coleman was quoted as saying, I made up my mind to try. I tried, and I was successful. That is Bessie Coleman. So I really hope that you get a chance to read these books. I know that these books were about women, but the same goes for boys. These last few books are about women, but the same would go for boys. Do you ever think that you would like to be a pilot of a plane? Is that something you would like to do? How about an author or a poet or a nurse? How about a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or a dancer or an actor or an artist or a singer or an athlete or an astronaut or an inventor or a mathematician or a leader? So these were the books that I had for you. Now, I started thinking, you guys are really smart. And if I think about what you're thinking about, I feel like you might be saying, well, Jeanette, you showed us a lot of girls and only one boy. I thought, yeah, that's really not fair, is it? Okay. We're going to add one more book. This book is about a boy who, just like the last book we just talked about, there's poets in that book. We're going to talk about a boy who is a poet. His name is Langston Hughes. And unfortunately, I don't have the book to show you because it's actually checked out right now, which is a good thing. This book is called I Too Am America by Langston Hughes, illustrated by Brian Collier. So this is a book that we have in our collection. And if you're interested in it, just let us know and we can hold it for you when it comes back in and get it checked out to you. So it's a picture book, and the picture book goes along with the poem. And I don't have the book, but I do have the poem, and I'm going to read that to you to end our book talk for today. So it's called I Too by Langston Hughes. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to the kitchen to eat when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on this amazing book talk. I have to say that the hardest part about doing these book talks is that there are so many great books. It is so hard to share just one. So thank you for allowing me to share more than one book with you today. Our library is opening up in phases, so please call us or reach out to us on Facebook or check our website to see how we can help get maybe these books or other books to you. So thank you again so much for